Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Tristan Rallings, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Flying Officer Connor Hayes. We warmly welcome the members of the Australian Federal Police that are joining us today to mark National Police Remembrance Day, which commemorates all those Australian police officers who have been killed on duty or died as a result of their service. We warmly welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland who are watching the broadcast of the ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you are able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of the more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths of floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private David John Simcock, David Simcock was born on the 5th of July 1883, the son of Edward and Bertha Simcock of Callington, South Australia. When David was 12 years old, his father died after a very painful and lingering cancer. His sister was also suffering from an extended illness, and David became the breadwinner for the family. A friend later described how from that point, Dave was the man of the house, its advisor in all things even then. In fact, his one thought was of and for his own people. Dave Simcock began working at a fruit seller's barrow in Port Pirie and was quickly successful. He had a shock of bright red hair, which earned him the nickname Pink Top, and he was described as having an originality that was irresistible, and this evoked that bright repartee and captivating humour that were so well known to all with whom he came in contact. Around the turn of the century, the Simcock family moved to Western Australia, where Edward Simcock had apparently worked as a gold miner. Dave Simcock once again turned to the fruit-selling business, travelling around the state in order to establish relationships directly with the growers. In 1906, Dave married Ellen Collins and they went on to have 2 children, Doris and Norman. He was eventually able to start a fruit shop in Barrack Street. He later recalled, "I had to borrow the money to pay the first week's rent. Well, I had to hustle, I can tell you, to make good with such a handicap as that." But hustle he did, and Pink Top's fruit shop was soon very successful. Simcock's sales techniques regularly resulted in crowds on the footpath on Barrack Street and disrupted traffic more than once. In 1912, he was in trouble for obstructing the traffic in Barrack Street. One bystander later said, "I suppose Simcock was doing his usual thing, crying out and trying to attract purchasers of his beautiful fruit." Far from causing resentment, Pink Top was extremely popular and well known for his antics. As early as 1911, he was described as this red-headed hustler who had become quite an institution in the city. And for decades after the war, he was fondly remembered as a smart-tongued, ruddy, red-headed young man with a fund of witty repartee. Yet, despite his often over-the-top humour, Dave Simcock had a deeply serious side to his nature and hated pretense in anything or anybody. Simcock enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force a month after the outbreak of war in 1914. Leaving his business in the hands of his manager, he sailed for active service overseas with the 11th Battalion in November 1914. Simcock wrote long, entertaining letters home to his family, friends, and even his customers after leaving Australia. One of his earliest letters to his family described leaving Fremantle and how, on the second day, we were well out of sight of land and about 3 p.m. noticed some smoke. When we got nearer, we found a sight never to be missed. There were transports and warships, and we took our position with them, the vessels travelling 3 abreast. Simcock made a strange, ungainly, and splay-footed soldier, but his sense of fun earned him enormous popularity amongst the 11th Battalion. He wrote of training near the pyramids in Egypt, adding, "There is a good deal of fun to be got of this life, one way or another. We have a good deal of fun with the donkeys. There are plenty of music halls, to all of which we get free admission. They have a way of selling milk quite different to anything I've ever seen before. Instead of carrying a milk can with them, they lead a cow round and milk her as customers demand." Pink Top's fame followed him to Egypt too. Soldiers wrote jokes home featuring the red-headed salesman setting up shop at the pyramids. In one joke, Pink Top pulled out a crumpled calico sign and read, "Pink Top's Pyramidian Boneyard. Bones sold here at the lowest rates. Special sale now on. Any quantities supplied half rates." In July 1915, nearly 700 officers and men of the 11th Battalion posed on the Great Pyramid of Cheops for what is now a famous photograph. The man at the very top is Dave Simcock, deliberately put there by his comrades so that the photo would have a pink top. In the early hours of the 25th of April 1915, the 11th Battalion landed at Anzac Cove under heavy fire. Private Simcock had apparently had a fear of encountering barbed wire in the water and cutting his legs up before getting ashore. This fear was sedulously encouraged by his mates until Simcock solved the problem by wrapping pieces of tin in his puttees. He landed with Delta Company without encountering wire, but his battalion quickly came muddled as the men stormed the heights. Over the following days, the Anzacs fought desperately to secure the front line, and it took several days to organise the situation. At some point during the early days on Gallipoli, Dave Simcock was killed in action. There were many stories written home of the manner of his death, from his being blown to pieces to being killed while leading his company in a charge on the Turkish positions after all the other officers had been shot down. Probably the most reliable account comes from Sergeant Mason, who was not far from Walker's Ridge when he saw Private Simcock crawl forward to try and find a wounded man that he knew was lying in the scrub. His official date of death is the 2nd of May, 1915. Western Australians were so shocked at the loss of their own pink top so early in the campaign. His death inspired a number of would-be poets, including ATC, who wrote, "Hats off, another name, burns on the shining roll of fame." Another, Dryblower, wrote, "He went tearing at the Turk, game and good. He got in some willing work like he would. What he had to give he gave, and in a foreign grave, he's sleeping like a brave soldier should." A South Australian later wrote, "Instead of writing bad verse about the gallant fellow, it would do far more good to remember those he left behind him." Even the Premier of Western Australia, Mr. Scadden, said, "Among the many who have been lost to Western Australia, I cannot help specially referring to Private Simcock, who I knew very well, and I sympathise with his mother, wife, and family." Today, Private Dave Simcock is buried in Baby 700 Cemetery at Anzac. It is believed his body was identified after the war by the makeshift tin plates put under his puttees. He has a simple epitaph that reads, "In memory of the dear husband of Ellen Simcock of Leaderville, Western Australia." He was 32 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private David John Simcock, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.